Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yeah, just give it a few seconds while people get connected before we start. So yeah, hello again. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network webinar on adapting silviculture practices to climate change. My name is Brooke Thelma, and I'm one of the facilitators of this online practitioners network, which is run by us here at the CRI. And I'm here today with my colleague Claire Sanders, who will be in the back end to provide support. And if at any time during the webinar you have questions or experience technical difficulties, click on the chat box and find our names in the drop-down menu of participants, and you can send us a direct message. And if you can't see our names, you can also send a message to the host and panelist, and we'll address your questions. Just to let you know, we are recording the webinar today, and we'll be sending out a copy of the recording along with the slides to all those who have registered. So yeah, before we go any further, I would like to gratefully acknowledge that I'm currently located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Indigenous people have long modeled sustainable forest management and land stewardship practices. And at the Climate Risk Institute, we're continually trying to improve both our knowledge, processes, and relationships so that we can highlight and integrate Indigenous perspectives and knowledge of climate change into our work. And with that, I invite you all to introduce yourselves and share the territories you're joining us from today in the chat if you would like to do so. So this webinar is part of the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network. It was formerly known as the Forestry Adaptation Committee of Practice, or the FACUP, which many of you may have been a part of. So the FAPN is made possible with support from the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers Climate Change Task Force. And we've recently redeveloped our online platform and launched it, which many of you have already a part of. But we're just going to take a few minutes to give you a quick tour of the new space. And for that, I'll pass it over to my colleague Claire, who will give you a brief overview of the new space and highlight some of the important features that we think you'll find useful.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Okay, can you see my screen, my correct screen this time? I'm always gonna. So I won't spend too long today. Again, I think many of you are already part of our new space. But if you are not and would like to join, Brooke is going to put a link to a direct invitation, so you don't have to request to join. You'll just sign right up. And when you join, you will essentially be brought to this page. It's the main page of the Forestry Adaptation Practitioners Network. It is hosted on a site called earthnet.world, and which is a broader networking site for both mitigation, adaptation, climate change work. A lot of hubs on here currently dedicated to retrofits and things like that. You're welcome to explore further through EarthNet or just stay connected just to the FACOP. We also have another hub on here that's for more general adaptation practitioners. So you're also welcome to join that. You can find our other groups just by clicking on groups, and you'll see, like I said, the Adaptation Practitioners Network. We also host one for infrastructure resiliency as well, which is the PIVC Practitioners Network. So when you arrive at the main page, you'll see many posts in here, all focused on forestry adaptation. There's tools in here, our member spotlights, all kinds of resources. You can either scroll through the full page, or you can search for resources or events just by clicking on the left here. You can see upcoming events through here. You can also see who else is actually in the space as well. So if you wanted to connect with another practitioner, you can scroll through team members. And this is really why it's really nice to fill out your profile in full when you first register, so that you can see who else is in here. And if you're looking for any expertise, you can search for other colleagues in the space here. This is meant for any forestry adaptation professionals who are interested in resources or gaining knowledge. If you wanted to put out a call for knowledge, or if you had a resource to share, we welcome you to do that. You just click on the little green button here and you can post an update. add a story, you could ask for help, you could post a poll. If there's something that you are working on and you wanted feedback, we would welcome you to post that in this site or reach out to us, and we can certainly help you navigate that and even set up your own project within the working space if you're interested. We're going to be putting all of the resources from today, including the slides, into this space. So please join. And the only other thing to note is that when you join this space, you will receive a weekly or bi-weekly email from Brooke, who sends out all of the posts. So you don't have to continually return to this site on I can't remember, Thursday or Friday. You'll get one email with all of the posts of interest, and you can click on those posts and it'll bring you back. You can comment on them. You can star them for future use. So anyway, it's a nice benefit so that you don't have to continually come back to the site. So I'm going to leave it there. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need help getting registered, or you, again, wanted to post some of your own resources in the site and are having trouble with that. Don't hesitate to reach out to Brooke or myself, and we hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire, for that nice overview. And one more thing that I'm not sure if she's mentioned is that membership is also free as well. So anybody is free to sign up. So yeah, moving on, we'll have some time at the end for a dedicated Q&A session, but that doesn't mean you have to hold your questions until then. So feel free to add your questions to the Q&A box or comment box below, and then I'll direct them to our speaker when he wraps up at the Q&A section. So with that being said, we are very excited to have our speaker, François, here today. François is a research scientist at the Direction de la Recherche forestière, or Forest Research Branch of the Ministère des Ressources, naturelles et des Forêts du Québec, so Quebec's Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests. And he has a PhD in forest science from Laval University with a specialization in adaptation of silviculture to climate change, functional ecology, invasive species management, and in ecophysiology. So on behalf of everyone joining us, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you, François, and thank you for taking the time to present this webinar for us today. So without further ado, I'll now turn things over to you to begin the presentation. Thank you. I think your mic is muted, François.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, perfect.
Good. So I'll share my screen. So everything's fine? Awesome. So like Brooke said, I'm François Hébert. I'm a research scientist at the Forest Research Branch at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests of Quebec. It's my second time at the research branch. The first time I was in the the plantation silviculture team from 2011 to 2015, and now I'm back as a scientist on adaptation silviculture on climate change. So where to start? I received the invitation a few weeks ago, and I didn't have any idea how to start and what's the public that we are going to be faced with. So I asked ChatGPT to help me to start my presentation on what is the best way to do it. And you see, the AI gave me a lot of knowledge and the things to do. But mainly the take-home message was this: do all these, but keep your introduction brief and focus on the main topic, which I'm not doing right now. So we're going to start the presentation by looking at the forest sector in Quebec City, in the province of Quebec, and then I will forward to my research project. So for the one that are not familiar with Quebec's forest management, you see you have the picture of the province with all the climatic domains in the province. So basically, the province it's divided into big zones: the temperate zone, which are indicated in green, yellow, and orange at the south of the province, where we find mixed and broadleaf stems. And in the blue shades, until the very north, it's the boreal forest, so mainly composed of a few species like a jack pine, black spruce, and balsam fir. And the line you see on the map, the black line is the managed forest in the province. So south of this line, we are managing the forest, and we harvest the forest for the forest sector. And above that, it's the Northern Territory that no management is done in those ecosystems. So in Quebec, mostly 91% of the on the land is crown land, so it's publicly owned by all citizens in Quebec. It's a huge industrial sector in Quebec. It provides roughly 60,000 jobs. Half of them are in the wood product sector, lumber, and all those wood products, and roughly a third of the jobs are still in the paper industry. But if we go back 40 years ago, the paper industry was way higher than today. But as you know, with all the new technologies, we're using less and less paper, so that's why there's less and less job in the paper industry. So the forest management and planning is since 2013 is done by our ministry. So it's done by forest engineers at the Ministère des Ressources, naturelles et des Forêts. And since 2013, we're doing some ecosystem-based management, and we introduced a measure that 25% of the volume per year that is allowed is allowed through public auction. So there's an auction at a specific time of the year, and company can bid on woodlots in the crown land. So since 2013, we're doing things like that. This is a graph on the last 10 years on what type of silviculture we're doing in Quebec City. Not in Quebec City, but in the province of Quebec. Since at least 40 or since the end of the 80s, we decided to rely a lot on the natural regeneration following harvest. So as you can see, roughly, if you combine the clear cutting with the partial cutting, so the yellow and dark blue curve, we're roughly harvesting 175,000 hectares per year, and most of them are regenerating naturally, so around 70%. With the as you can see here, with one view here, we're roughly around 70% of the cut blocks that are well regenerated naturally. So for the 30% that are not well regenerated, we're doing some a huge amount of plantation each year. Basically, we're planting around 150,000 million plants per year. I think that we can outline here also is we're not performing a lot of commercial thinning, and we'll get into that later in the presentation. So yeah, so basically we're relying a lot on natural regeneration. And when we look at the AAC by species group in public forests, you can see that roughly 2/3 of the species are spruces, pines, larcher than firs, so softwoods, and the other third, the other third is composed on hardwood. So mainly in the southern the south part of the province. And the most planted species, like I said earlier, are the black spruce, white spruce, and jack pine. So mainly we're planting some hardwood species, but the vast majority of the volume planted is composed on those three species. Like I said earlier, I'm working on adaptation of silviculture to climate change. So as you probably know, climate change effects on forest ecosystem are diverse, and we already see some of those changes already in our forest. So the anticipated impact of climate change are the increase of the average temperature. We're expecting longer growing season, but we're also expecting an increased risk of drought events and more freeze-thaw events, and we can already feel it. Especially here in the province in the winter, so around January and February, we have a lot of those events that we didn't have 30 years ago. And we're also gonna have an increase of peak flows, especially in spring. So all those changes will probably impact forest productivity, stand composition, the area burned by wildfire, and the consequence of the more wildfire on the frequency of regeneration failure, the duration and severity of insect infestation, the emergence and spread of some invasive exotic species, the change of habitat for wildlife species, and finally the land access to the integrity of the infrastructure and multi-purpose roads that are widespread on the territory. But the forest sector has a role in the fight against climate change. The IPCC recognized that the forestry sector is a mitigation actor through the contribution to carbon sequestration in forest ecosystem and in wood products, and by using wood products to replace material with higher carbon footprint like concrete and steel. However, the forest sector ability to contribute to the climate change mitigation will be impacted by the climate change itself. So there's really a need to adapt our forestry practice, that we ensure that the consistency of mitigation measure will be implemented. So there's no mitigation if there's no adaptation. The two are closely linked. So the government of Quebec, through the Ministry of the Environment, launches in 2022 a vast program to finance economic measure to adapt for climate change. So the research project that I'm starting right now are going to be financed by the Plan for an Economy Vert, or a Plan for a Green Economy, and there's many actions and that are present in the plan. One of them, the action 3.3.1.1, with it's aiming at to evaluate the impact of climate change on the most vulnerable economic sectors like forestry, and support them through the implementation of adaptation solutions. So the research project that will be presented today are going to be financed by this plan until 2027, and we're expecting that it will we'll have a renewal of those grants in the future. So when we look at the ecosystem adaptation options, so in the literature, you see a lot of those three terms, so resistance, resilience, and transition. Basically it's a portfolio of adaptation options that we can use to answer or to maintain management goals. So when we go lower and more at the end of resistance, we are aiming to favor ecosystem persistence, and the transition will help to manage the change. So if I defining the three terms, the resistance is an adaptation of term that it is aimed to increase the ecosystem defenses against the change caused by the climate change, to keep the ecosystem intact. So resistance measure will consist to improve ecosystem defenses or defend directly the ecosystem against the disturbances. So to keep the ecosystem intact or to give more time to species to adapt. Resilience, as probably everybody knows, is to get the capacity of an ecosystem to tolerate disturbance and to returning to a similar state. So, and the transition is an adaptation option which is aimed to facilitating the modification of the ecosystem by manipulating, for example, species composition to better adapt the ecosystem to the new climatic condition. This option is aimed to decrease the time that will take for natural transition to occur and to stabilize the industrial structure that by securing a wood supply of selected species in a specific region. So what you need to learn or to it's a continuum of management goals that are related to the level of desire or tolerance change in ecosystem attribute, and the temporal horizon goes too short for the resistant option, all the way too long with the transition. And the more vulnerable the forest is, the more change it will be needed. So based on that, we decided to tailor a research project with those options in a phase one of a research project in adaptation of silviculture at our ministry. So what we did in 2020, we sat down with three pilot regions to assess their risk associated with climate change. As you can see, the province is very big, so the risks are very different from south to north and from east to west. So we sat down with three pilot region, and we designed and we decided to implement a research project, one research project per region. So the first one, which is going to be a resistance project, will be in Outaouais regions near Ottawa. The second one will be a resilience project in near Chibougamau in the boreal forest in the northern part of the province. And the third one, which is still in development and thinking, will be located in Gaspésie. So it's going to be a transition project. So as you can see, we're covering a lot of the province here, but we're expecting in the future to have more and more regions that's going to come with new ideas to implement some adaptation measure for their territory. So this is only the first, the phase one. There's going to be probably a phase two of this research program. So today we'll focus more on the resistance and the resilience project that are starting right now. So in 2023. So the three project will be for the resistant one, we're gonna do some commercial thinning to improve water stress resistance in plantation in the context of climate change in the southern part of the province. The resilience project will be the use of mixed species plantation to increase resilience to wildfire in boreal forest. And the third one will be the management of three species composition, both in plantation and natural stems, through enrichment planting and mixed species plantation. So I'm not working alone on those big research projects. So you have the list here of the collaborators on the resistant project. So I'm gonna have colleagues from my research branch, so Émilie Champagne, Catherine Perrier, Patricia Raymond, and researchers from other universities in the province of Quebec. So Annie Deslauriers from the University du Québec and François Hébert from the University of Montreal that will collaborate to the project, and other people in the ministry in other direction that will help us on most of the operational aspect of the project. So currently in Quebec, if you don't know right now, we're not doing. We decided in 2001 to ban chemical herbicide to do some vegetation management. So we developed a recipe to address to install some plantation. So depending on the site productivity, we're gonna have scenario where no release will be needed after plantation, from a first release all the way to a second release if the site productivity is necessary. So, and right now we're planting our plantation between 1,600 and 2,000 stem per hectare. But in the past, many plantations were planted with higher density than that. So the silvicultural treatment that we're doing in the first year following planting, like manual release, are designed to allow stem to grow freely. But if no commercial thinning is done when needed, a competition for the resources, basically light, the nutrients and water, will start to install between plant and stems due to too high density. And in this context, some stems will inevitably start to dominate the other ones at the expense of other planted stems. So water availability has been shown to be a limiting factor for softwood's radial growth. So by lowering the number and size of cambial cells in the annual growth ring. But some people ask me the question, yeah, but is it the case in Quebec, because we're in a province where we have a sufficient precipitation through the year. So is it going to be the case in Quebec? So we many researchers in the province did some dendroclimatic studies that show that water availability has a limited impact on tree productivity, and especially in boreal forests. But a few studies in the last decade showed that under the 49th parallel, so in the southern part of the province, water availability could influence black spruce radial growth. So it could be a potential issue, especially in the southern part of the Quebec, the province of Quebec. But what about climate change? So, and excuse me, it's in French, but I will guide you into that. So you have here some projection for and you have the calendar year here and the maximal temperature, summer temperature model here, and you see that we already see an increase of temperature due to climate change, and depending on the scenarios you are looking for, we're expecting to have, for example, in 2050, probably a 2 to 3 degrees increase in the region of Outaouais. So in the western part of the province, and also one of the regions in the south. So yeah, the maximum of the temperature will increase. The precipitation will remain probably the same. So, but if we look at the number of heat waves that we'll see in the next year, so as a heat wave, it's defined by Uranus as a maximum temperature of 31 degrees and a minimum temperature at night of 16 degrees. So as you can see, there's definitely an increase, an expected increase of those heat waves and the number of days of heat wave in the next decade. So which could have a huge effect on water relation of tree species. And if we look and if we model that into a map, you see that where the research project I will present you in the next slide, we're gonna see around 10 days of very hot days in the next year. So it could be an issue with trees that are in this sector. And a new study published in 2022 by the team of Peter Reich in Minnesota shows that even modest climate change may lead to major transition in boreal forests. So what they did is they look at seedlings from many boreal species that are at the most south envelope of their distribution, and they show that they increase artificially the temperature and limited the precipitation. And the main finding of this study showed that treatment where species were exposed to hotter and drier climate than their climate envelope had the most adverse effect on survival and growth, and it was not a big change in the condition. So it was what we're gonna probably expect for the next year. So the most sensible species were jack pine and white spruce, and it's 2 of the 3 most planted species here in Quebec. So, and another findings which were concerning is show that in this study showed that even on mesic site, white spruce and balsam fir will probably decline despite a modest increase of temperature. So what we found in this paper is even some slight change of some minor change of climate can have a huge effect on the survival and growth of those species. And if we look at the work that my colleague Catherine did in the last decade, so she modeled the future, the climatic envelope of all the species that we have here in Quebec. So and she used some climatic model to predict what the habitat of those species will look like in the next decades. So you see that for the 2040-2070 interval for white spruce, so you see that the more the habitat will become less and less favorable for the growth of and the survival of the species. So the more we go into red, the less favorable it is. It's basically the same thing for black spruce. So and we're looking at the Ottawa region, and for jack pine the situation is even worse. So there's even in the southern part of those regions, we're expecting that the climate will be so detrimental for jack pine that it will not be able to grow there. So we're starting to look with the region what we could do, because they have a lot of plantation of jack pine and white spruce in this region. So what we could do to ensure that the plantation will provide the expected wood supply in the next decade. So we look at one solution, so to use commercial thinning. So there's more and more papers that are looking at this solution to reduce the effect, to use commercial thinning to improve water relation. So, and those studies show that there's positive effects of thinning, and it increases with intensity. So the more intense we do the thinning, so the more wood we harvest at the first commercial thinning, the better the effects are for the remaining stems. However, the thinning effect is specific for each species, so it's not one response for all species. It decreases with time. It's normal. So because the remaining stem is going to be growing and will require more and more resources with time, and the thinning effect becomes negligible after between 20 and 40 years. So, and it's not a solution for every plantation. For example, for tree species already at their water stress tolerance limit on dry station, thinning could be insufficient to improve water stress resistance. So we need to focus on plantation that are still growing well and that are not at this limit of on dry station. So basically, use some what we're doing operationally right now in Quebec. And also the physiological mechanism involved in the thinning response are still poorly understood. So we have the earlier studies looked at the more dendroclimatic type of studies, and more we're starting to look to see more physiological type of studies that look at the water relation in the remaining stems. So, and I'm coming back to this graph because, as you can see, and as I said earlier, it's the commercial thinning is not a treatment that we're used to do in Quebec for many reasons. Mostly because at the time thinning was required in the past. There was not a lot of markets for thin wood, so we decided not to thin or to delay the thinning. So we have a backlog of plantation that need to be thinned. Also, the government of Quebec came out with a wood production strategy that wants to increase the harvested wood volume in the next decade, but in order to do that, we're going to need to look at commercial thinning and to valorize the wood that will be extracted from those thinnings. So the objective of this research project is to evaluate the financial and the operational feasibility of various thinning intensities as a water stress management tool in softwood plantation in a context of climate change. The other objective will be to measure the growth and the physiology of the residual stems that were going to be submitted to various thinning intensity. So we're implementing this year two trials. So one for jack pine and one for white spruce. As you can see here, we're near the town of Maniwaki, so it's in the Ottawa region, in the Western Sugar Maple Yellow Birch bioclimatic subdomain. So it's pretty much in the southern end of the province. On the glaciofluvial outwash deposit, and we're going to do an experimental design which is going to have 4 blocks, and in each blocks we're going to do one controlled thinning, one thinning of 30% of basal area harvested, which is what we're doing right now. So what is favored for those plantation, and two higher thinning intensity, so 40 and thinning percent, 50% of the basal area harvested. So the plantation that we selected were planted in 1990. There was a pre-commercial thinning in 2000 for jack pine and 2004 for white spruce. And we're going to do the thinning in the 2023 for white spruce, and in 2024 for jack pine. So we're going to do two types of measurement. We're going to do some scientific physiology measurement, and also some operational measurement and some financial analysis to see if this adaptation measure is commercial, will be feasible economically. So we're gonna measure some variables here, some of the harvested volume, the mean stem volumes to harvest and prior to harvest, and we're gonna do some cost benefits analysis with a model that was developed here at the ministry. And we're going to do some lumber product assortment with the StatStar model, which was published in AUTSI et al. 2014. So this will be the operational side of the project. And for the more scientific one, we're going to study some. We're going to try to look at the link between the environment and the physiology of the stem. So we're going to measure the environmental variables in the air, in the soil, the leaf area index. We're going to focus on the physiology of the especially on water relations of the stem. So sap flow, photosynthesis, water potential, cavitation, water use efficiency, and we're gonna put some dendrometers to assess the real-time radial growth of the stem to be to look at the growth response of the residual stem after the thinning. So this is the first project. The second one will be the resilience project with colleagues from the area, but also colleagues from the federal government, some people from NRCan, and Jean-François Boucher from the University of Quebec in Chicoutimi. And also my collaborators here at the Minister will be again Patricia Raymond, Émilie Champagne, and Daniel Dumais. That's gonna help me, who's gonna help me for this project. So it's not big news that the climate change, the effects of climate change is already seen on wildfire regime. So I just look at the registration for this conference, and there's a lot of people from BC. So it's not a big news that we're gonna have elevation in wildfire frequencies that we're already see in BC and Alberta. So there's a lot of papers that tells us that wildfire will be a huge concern for boreal forests in Canada, especially in the west, but also in the eastern part of the province. So in 2020, I did a research, literature review to see is it the case in Quebec, and what are the findings. So basically in Quebec, we're gonna see an increase of surface area burn, fire season, the increase of number of fires and their intensity in the end through the 21st century. And the western part of the province will be more affected than the east. The most affected bioclimatic domains will be the lichen woodland. So the light pink area, but also the spruce feather moss and the white birch balsam fir domain. So the boreal forest will be mostly affected by wildfires. And in last year, my colleagues from the direction from the inventory direction did a work to create some homogeneous zone of which we could define a fire cycle, and you see that with the historical period from 1890 to 2020, we came out with fire cycle for many regions, and you see that it's pretty variable in the province, but in the western part we already have fire cycle that are less than 250 years. So even in a part what we call the fire triangle, when we have fire cycle around 120 years. So, and the chief forester came out with is starting to look at how it could integrate the climate change impact on the allowable annual calculation. And the main conclusion of this report is there going to be more regeneration failure due to in the broader forest due to wildfire events. There will be shorter wildfire cycle, and over the next 150 years, the productivity gain expected with climate change will not be enough to offset the increase of wildfire activity. So therefore, that a huge proportion of harvested volume will come from salvage harvest, which is difficult to predict. So he came with a few recommendations, and the one of them is to have a better integration of wildfire and other disturbances in the allowable cut calculation, and also to develop new adaptation measures. So to be sure that we are attacking this topic. And also in 2021, there's one paper that showed that the increasing fire and decline of the fire-adapted black spruce in the raw forest is already there and will increase in the next years. And a few of my colleagues also, in collaboration with some university researcher, came out with a report to see how we can adjust our wood production strategies in a few parts of the boreal forest, especially the one that I call the fire triangle. So the main findings of this project is to, after a few decades, there's going to be a loss of productive stand that will increase significantly. This will add to the decrease of wood production of the remaining stand due to climate change. So, and black spruce, which is the most economically important species in Quebec, will be impacted the most because its sexual maturity occurs later than other species like jack pine. So it makes it very vulnerable to regeneration failure, especially in the region where the fire cycle is very short. So the main recommendation of the researcher was to reduce the risk exposure time for our silvicultural investment that we are already doing in those regions. And how? By using species with an early sexual maturity, mixed with mixed with the black spruce, which is the desirable species. So the solution that I started to think of is which could be useful to test, is to do mixed species plantation with black spruce and jack pine. Why using those species? Because naturally, roughly 10% of the boreal forest in the western part is composed with mixed stand of jack pine and black spruce. So it's we already have that in those ecosystems. So we, like I said, the black spruce is the most desirable species, but the sexual maturity is coming later than other species. Like you can see, there's only a 50% probability to bear cones at 30 years of age. And the seedling recruitment following wildfire is limited by the number of seeds available for a period up to 50 years. So if we plant only black spruce, we have a window, a 50-year window where our investment is very vulnerable to wildfire. Also, the species is an isohydric species. So if we mix them with jack pine, which has a higher juvenile growth rate and a cone production sufficient to regenerate a stand at 10 years, so we are decreasing the window of vulnerability of the plantation. Also,
hi, François. Sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to give you a notice that we have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Left. Yeah.
Good. It's going to be okay. So there's and the water management strategy, it's different between those species. And a recent finding showed that those species that are planted close from each other with those two strategy will be able to help each other and to have a better productivity. So basically, we will use jackpine as an insurance policy. As you can see here, we can do a mixed species plantation when the excess are the jackpine. And you see if in the first year, if we do a mixed species plantation, we have a 10 years when we are at risk. But after that, if the fires is there a fire event, the natural regeneration of jackpine will take up, and if not, we're gonna have a scenario when we're gonna be able to have a return on our investment. But there are some challenges associated to mixed species plantation. First of all is the establishment and growth of planted species, which we don't know right now. Are the species we're going to facilitate or compete for resources? Is it operationally and economically feasible? So we don't know right now. And there are some challenges, for example, to calculate growth and yield tables for plantation patterns, for release and thinning treatment, etc. So the objective of this study is to evaluate the operational feasibility and economic profitability of various mixed species plantation patterns by quantifying their effect on planters and on the tree seedling supply chain, to measure the initial success of planted seedlings in terms of their survival, growth, and physiology as a function of their microsite, and to look and measure the mid and long-term success of the planted seedlings in terms of survival, growth, physiology, and on the carbon budget, and the influence of the competing vegetation on those variables. So we're going to do an experimental design with 4 blocks where we're going to have a pure black spruce plantation, a pure jackpine plantation, and two mixed species plantation, one with one strip of jackpine in each 4 row, and the other one where we're gonna really mix one after the other every species. So it's gonna be an intimate mix. So it's gonna be located in the western spruce feathermost domain near the fire triangle. The scenario is to perform this scarification, a plantation at 1,600 stem an hectare, manual release, and the thinning of jackpine, and finally a clear cut. No mix of species will be made in container at the nursery site. It's going to be the planter will go onto the field with a container of black spruce and a container of jackpine, and it will plant accordingly. So we're going to study some variables on the survival, physiology, photosynthesis, water potential, some functional threats. We're going to characterize a plantation microsite. We're also going to do some carbon assessment, and we're going to link that to the environmental variables. And for the operational and economic measure, we're going to do some person time measurement and cost of every step of plantation establishment, from site preparation to manual release. And the goal is to establish payment rates for mixed species plantation versus what we do right now. And shortly, I will just give you a little preview of the transition project. The objective is going to be to assist or facilitate the transition of species in order to maintain the wood productivity and forest ecosystem, where some species could be not adapted to new climatic condition, and we're going to target the Bas-Saint-Laurent and Gaspésie region. So in brief, we know that the impact of climate change on the Quebec's forestry sector is a major concern from our ministry and also for the government of Quebec due to the economic importance for the province. As you can see, adaptation of silviculture is still at its development stage, but I'm not the only one working on that. We have colleagues from the federal government. We have colleagues from all the university that are starting to look at some measure. But there's a knowledge gap that remains on the estimation of the climate change risk on the forest ecosystem and on their integration in forest management and planning in Quebec. So if you have questions, so I'll be thank you for having me, and I will be available for all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. That was a great presentation. So we have a few questions that came in the chat that I'll just ask, and one that came in registration. And just for everyone listening, if we're unable to get to the questions, we'll send them to Francois after, and you can also send answers in a follow-up email tomorrow to all registrants. So yeah, let's just jump right in. One question that came through the registration was, have you done any testing of European/Asian conifer species like Pinus sylvestris that have extensive geographical ranges?
No, we did not look. We're not looking right now to some exotic species. So because we're the expertise to produce those plants in our ministry we are focusing on native species, but my colleague Catherine Perrier started a new research project, and she's gonna go back into the old arboretum that were implemented in the 70s, where we decided to plant all kinds of different species, so Scots pine and many species, and we're going to see which one did well and which one did not so well, and due to the fact that the arboretum was a few of them were abandoned, so if we have good success with a few species, so it's, and the seed source were not the best when we planted those species. So, but yeah, we were looking at we're thinking outside the box and see if if they can be other species. But when we think of exotic species, there are some issue with the population. They're afraid of that might be not a good thing. So if we're looking, first of all, we're looking at species that are native to North America. So if not, in the future, we'll probably look at other species.
Thank you for that. Another question that came through the Q&A this time was, the figures showing the area for treatment show that pre-commercial thinning was implemented in the early 2010s, but has been decreasing since then. I was wondering, one, why we see this trend and how much area was treated before 2010, and two, whether this trend should indeed not be reversed to improve climate change adaptation.
Pre-commercial thinning was started to become more and more popular in the beginning of 2000 years, but I'm not an expert into that. But we started to do a lot of pre-commercial thinning, but especially in natural stand. So, but as you can see, for many reasons, we're doing less of those of this treatment, and there's probably many issues, but one of them is the the budget allowed for those treatments. So the budget allowed for silviculture treatments has increased, but very slightly. So probably we decided to put more money in other treatments, and as there's some shortage of people that are willing to do this treatment, because it's a huge work to do. So there's less and less people that are willing to do it. So it's maybe one of the reason why we do less and less of those things.
Okay, thank you, François. There are a few other questions in the chat, but I think we're out of time now, so we'll have them answer. We'll have François answer that in writing and reach out to you. So we've saved your questions and we'll share it with François so you can answer it. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar. We hope it was valuable. As I mentioned before, this presentation is recorded, so we'll send it out to everyone registered and post it in our online space as well for future viewing. And we'll also provide a link to a survey about this webinar at the end. And we also would welcome ideas for webinars from you for the future. So if you would like, please reach out to us. Finally, I'd like to extend a very big thank you to our speaker, François, for your time and effort and for this great and informative presentation. And thank you all and have a good one.